Welcome, everybody. My name is Kaza Gomis with Trek Systems. Joining us today, we have Dan Birkbeck and Peter Roach.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, y'all.
And a quick look at our agenda today. We're mainly focusing on this new update from Victron, Venus OS 3.6. And we'll cover some new products that go hand in hand with this update, as well as new features included in the user interface. So we'll save a bit of time at the end for any outstanding questions. But this week, we're also going to pause for discussion a few times throughout. We've got a lot of sharp people joining us today, and we'd love to get your thoughts on some of this and make this more of a conversation. And with that, I'll pass it off to Dan.
Thank you, Kaza. So first up, some new products from Victron and a new supported product. So there are a few new BMS options available for Victron NG batteries. We've got the small BMS NG as well as the VE bus BMS NG. And these are lower cost alternatives to the Lynx BMS NG, which was the only BMS available for NG batteries at first. And compared to the previous iterations of these BMSs, these NG models come with Bluetooth, so you can monitor battery information from Victron Connect now. In addition, these BMSs receive current and state of charge data directly from the batteries because of the NG battery's internal shunt. So there's no need for a separate smart shunt as a battery monitor anymore. So that's a really big improvement over the previous iterations. And Victron has also added two options for native digital switching on GX devices via the new switch pane. We've got the Energy Solutions SmartSwitch, which isn't an official Victron product, but is natively supported, and the GX IO Extender 150. And we'll get a little bit more into those in the coming slides here. All right, so one of the most exciting additions from this OS update is this added switch pane, which you can see at the top left of our photo here. And this new switch pane offers quick access to switching functions in vehicles, boats, stationary systems, whatever you're using a Victron system in. It's accessible either via GX touchscreen or through VRM. Gives you quick access for controls for loads, relays, digital outputs on supported devices. You got three types of outputs: the momentary, like while you're holding a button, latching on and off, like a relay, and dimmable, PWM control for lighting dimming as well as fan control. You can customize the name of the devices and individual switch outputs on the UI. They can also be grouped together on a card in the switch pane to create things like different lighting zones. And you can also disable any unused inputs so you only see what you need. And the switch pane, it's only going to be present on your UI if you have a compatible switching device connected, like the GX IO Extender or SmartSwitch. And devices from other digital switching partners will soon follow. All right, so the first third-party device that integrates with the switch pane is the Energy Solutions SmartSwitch. And the SmartSwitch is a module that fully integrates with GX device user interfaces, can also be monitored remotely with VRM. It'll allow you to directly control DC loads from the GX user interface, things like fans, lights, etc. It's got 4 digital channels capable of switching at up to 5 amps each and an overall constant load of 15 amps. It's plug and play with VE CAN. Up to 5 units can be daisy chained together for expanded I/O. Can also be daisy chained with other VE CAN products like Victron MPPTs and Lynx BMS or Lynx Shunt. Channels for the SmartSwitch are configurable as binary on-off, momentary control to only activate when a button is held, or PWM control for light dimming and fan speed. You can assign names to the individual channels as well as the units themselves. You can also group these together, meaning loads on different smart switches can be grouped together and shown on a single card in the switch pane. It works at both 12 and 24 volts and can also be controlled using Node-RED, We do have these in stock now, and we can drop a link in the chat for those interested as well. So the other option from Victron, the GX IO extender, it's similar, but also a little different from the SmartSwitch. As the name implies, the GX IO extender enhances the input and output capabilities of a GX device, enabling seamless integration with additional sensors, controls, external devices. Can be controlled using Node-RED as well as the switch pane in the user interface. It adds 3 additional relays for use on the Servo GX or GX devices. 1 solid state, 2 bistable relays, 8 additional digital inputs or outputs, and as well as the PWM outputs for lighting, fan speed control. Connects to the GX device and is powered with a USB connection. As of now, the relays can only be manually controlled on the GX UI. Further automation of things, if you wanted to control one of the relays based on temperature to activate a fan or heating pads, it would have to be done using Node-RED. So let's pause for a second here. You guys have a specific use case for either of these products, the SmartSwitch or the GX IO extender? What are your thoughts on this? So Kenny asked, how many devices does one need to control for the SmartSwitch? That's 4, and they can be daisy chained up to 5 together. So you've got potential for up to 20 total.
TJ.
So yeah, I was working on a van recently that had digital switching from RedArc, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then maybe a week later, I got this email. So and I'm really excited to see this because I really don't like the look and feel of RedArc's products and user interface. It's very this is a really nice, clean, minimal. Seems like almost a modular solution, being able to group zones and create different scenes. Yeah, I think this could be really powerful for more dynamic lighting in a van, eliminating complexity and wire run distances, like having switches in different locations. Being able to have all of our switch runs land in one zone is going to help us be more efficient with wiring and installs. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. I think it's a cool product.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, both of those are good examples of, real world how this could be used. Thank you, TJ. Kenny.
Yeah, I have a customer I'm doing the Valtura gray tank valve on. And that has like a momentary,
okay.
it'll switch until it's all the way open, and then the light will stay on. Then you switch it and it'll go all the way closed and the light goes off. So I was super curious. It'd be a great use to have this in the Victron, on the touchscreen when if you're driving or at a dump station.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Easy access to switch the gray tank and dump that easily. Nice. Well, yeah, I see there's a couple other questions in the chat. I mean, in terms of answering chat questions, what do you guys think? Maybe save those to the end. Should we do those now? What do you think?
Yeah, we can address some of that towards the end.
Okay, cool. Anybody else have anything right now that you'd like to share? Or?
I'm curious, will it start a generator?
So the generator,
I'm not sure. I think it would depend if it's a 2-wire versus 3-wire, where I see somebody else had commented about like an Onan generator start, and generally Onans have a 3-wire start. So we'd have to look and confirm, because you could use something like the elevation, the auto gen start module, and convert from 3-wire to 2-wire. With the GX IO extender specifically, I don't remember the exact specs. I can find out though. The relays themselves, they're pretty limited in their ampacity. I want to say like 2 or 3 amps at most. And I don't think they're not configurable from the UI the way that the built-in servo relays are. So right now, as far as I'm aware, the only The only relay you could use to start a generator would be relay 1 on the servo for auto gen start.
Which, someone mentioned in the chat, like, yeah, with a 2-wire, you don't need additional components. With a 3-wire, if you have this elevation, which basically takes the 2-wire signal and converts it into 3-wire for the ONAN, now you also have the advantage of all of the built-in settings from, the servo or the GX device interface that allows you to do things like quiet hours and starting based on certain conditions like state of charge, that kind of thing. So using the native GX relays is still probably the best bet when it comes to generator auto start stop. But yeah, definitely interesting, and potentially, I don't know if with maybe Node-RED we could turn these relays on the IO extender into from a 2-wire to a 3-wire possibly, but then there's still this idea of not having all of the advanced kind of programming capability that lives on the GX device when using the native relay for auto gen start stop.
Mm-hmm. So hypothetically, you could do it manually using this, but any automatic start stop settings would just need to be done through the servo itself.
Okay, cool. We'll come back to some of these questions in the chat here in a bit. For now, let's talk about some of the user interface updates. So in addition to the switch pane, there have been some other updates to the UI. The settings menu is now more organized, so it's a bit easier to find what you're looking for with higher level categories and breadcrumbs. As of now, it is important to note that updating to the new OS will not automatically switch to the new UI. When updating from an older firmware that uses the classic UI, you should be prompted to select the new UI as an option. But if after updating your system still displays the classic UI, then you can navigate to the settings, display and language, user interface, and from there, select the new UI. Okay, the brief page in the UI now allows individual tanks to be selected for display as ring gauges. So rather than being limited to selection by tank type, this gives you the flexibility to show, the vehicle fuel tank or a propane tank level alongside water tanks for quick reference. This update also adds the modifications check page, which provides a quick view of the status of the software running on a GX device. So now you can quickly see if a system has been modified in any way and can reduce time spent supporting modified systems by quickly ruling that out, reverting it back to standard settings. Modified systems that might include those running Venus OS large using Node-RED or Signal K, things like that. And this update also introduces a dedicated electric boat page accessible via a new icon at the bottom of the new user interface. So this is designed for small craft with electric propulsion systems, and it displays key information like speed, RPM, electric motor power consumption, and battery state of charge. This is really interesting, especially for those in the marine industry who are familiar with MFDs or multifunction displays. So the GX Touch, it's technically already a multifunction display as we get energy data as well as tank levels, temperature, and now switching capabilities. But with these updates for electric boats, it seems clear that more and more data will be available through the GX Touch. Just speculating, but perhaps soon we'll see options for GPS, navigation, weather, radar, sonar. Any other ideas? What other data or controls would you like to have accessible from a GX touchscreen?
I think it'd be really cool for Victron to try and really take the GX touchscreen from something that focuses on control of the systems to also giving the user helpful data on the environment around them. So more like a kind of smart home hub, like HomeKit or something where you could get, maybe third-party apps developed and things like, widgets with like weather or um, location data. Obviously, you'd need an internet connection for that type of thing, but if you need to see this become more like a HomeKit style UI that's highly customizable with other data outside of the system. And I know I was thinking kind of big, but yeah, I think that'd be cool to see.
Totally. And I mean, it feels like the foundation's there in terms of the display and the graphics that are already available and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be awesome. We've got one from Randy. What's needed in the RV space to enable GPS for the new UI? So do we even have GPS? Was that mentioned in this electric boats page as a feature? It is. Okay. Then I think as long as you have a GPS receiver, you'd be able to use that regardless, right?
I don't know that it would show up outside of the boat page, like on the brief page necessarily. We'd have to look into that. I know that there are natively supported external GPSs, like with the, like if you have the GX LTE 4G, and I think there's some USB GPSs as well, but yeah, we'd have to look into that and we can follow up with you on that.
Yeah, and Jordan has a similar question about the external GPS being able to display speed on the boat page. I imagine that's how they're getting speed on the boat page is using the GPS. So I suspect that would work pretty much the same for an RV. But yeah, definitely something that we'll need to look into, and we'll include that on the blog post. Well, with that, let's hand it over to Peter.
All right. Thanks, Kaza. So VE Bus Backup and Restore. So this allows for quick and easy configuration of VE Bus devices connected to your GX. So you'll find this feature in the Advanced tab of the VE Bus device menu. From there, you can back up and save the current configuration and then apply a selected configuration across all VE Bus connected units. So this would be especially useful for easily restoring a system after replacing a faulty Multiplus or a Quattro. The new device will automatically be detected and the settings will be applied and with the correct configuration. This ability also enables seamless switching between system types, such as moving from a 120 240 volt split phase setup to a 120 volt single phase setup, or even to standalone operation. Keep in mind, with these backup files, they are firmware specific, meaning they can only be used to restore settings to devices with the same firmware version as the backup file. This is important when updating firmware remotely through VRM, as settings will be reset, and then you will need to reconfigure the system. However, when updating firmware locally using Victron Connect and an MK3 to USB adapter, the software will automatically restore the previous settings, eliminating the need for manual reconfiguration. So in any case of updating VE Bus firmware, be sure to create a new backup file after you've done the update. Now let's take a look at some of the new functionality with the NG batteries. While Victron batteries do not have internal heating, we do carry heating pads that are designed for heating lithium batteries. These are sized for various Victron Smart lithium batteries, as well as the Victron NG batteries. So each pad is dimensioned to fit properly. Now, we had a question in the chat about this earlier about some battery heating. And so now, when using the NG batteries with the Lynx BMS NG, we have the ability to drive relays on the GX device directly from the battery cell temperature reading, communicated straight from the battery to the BMS. This means we can trigger heating or active cooling without the use of external temperature sensors. This further streamlines the wiring and programming needed to set these systems up. And this ability is also available with other managed batteries that transmit cell temperature to the GX. Now, let's check in about some Node-RED improvements now. Take it, Dan.
All right, so Node-RED, there's been some improvements made and additional features added. Node-RED is a visual programming tool that allows users to connect and automate various devices, including those in Victron systems, using a graphical interface like you can see on this photo here. And basically, it's a way to create custom logic and control without actually having to know how to write code. So you can drag and drop these preset nodes to control different functions within a Victron system. What's really cool about Node-RED and where it really shines is this ability to add custom automation and controls that you'd otherwise be unable to do with native options using the Servo or a GX device touchscreen or things like assistance within inverter chargers. So some examples of things that we've used Node-RED for in the past include switching a 120 volt fridge between electric and propane automatically based on battery state of charge. We did that using the AC out 2 of a multi-plus inverter charger. In addition, controlling the trickle charger of a multi-plus. For those who are familiar, the multi-plus does have a trickle charger that can be used to keep a starter battery topped up. And so we set up a custom flow to prevent that trickle charger from draining a house battery. And also things like automatically adjusting a multi-plus input current limit if you've got a generator running. This is just a few examples of some of the things we've come up with and what's possible within Node-RED. So while Node-RED isn't officially supported by Victron, they've been kind enough to integrate it with these systems if you install Venus OS Large. So really opens up a world of possibilities. So with this update, the new version of Victron's Node-RED, it introduces what are called virtual machines or virtual devices, making it possible to create virtual equivalents of the devices listed here, just to name a few. So batteries, PV inverters, temperature sensors, tanks. And so this can be used for a number of things. And I guess at a high level, virtual devices, basically, they allow data from external systems like those that use Modbus, TCP, MQTT, communication protocols that are compatible with Node-RED. And basically, with virtual machines now, we could take PV inverters or batteries, temperature sensors that aren't natively supported by Victron and push that information through Node-RED to show on the GX touchscreen. So it would show up as if it was fully supported. So for example, something like import data from a customer specialized tank monitor, right? And in addition to this, there's another useful update with Node-RED. Now we've got this ability to control the relays of MPPTs. That was something that we didn't previously have. So yeah, with that, we can switch that or send this back over to Peter, excuse me.
Thanks, Dan. The new UI now offers a button in the remote console to add a GX device to VRM without needing the portal ID from the device sticker. So this really simplifies getting your GX device into your VRM. On the touchscreen, there will be a QR code that can be scanned that will register the GX device to VRM as well. Some generator improvements include the ability to stop a generator based on a tank level, to avoid an airlock when the tank runs empty. The new option is now added to the list of conditions in the settings menu of the generator. The generator can be located in the device list in the new UI. To get there, we'll go to the device list, the genset, settings, conditions, and tank level. So now the Orion XS can now be configured as a standard DC to DC converter instead of a charger. And in this case, it will not be controlled by DVCC. This update also gives users options to enable BMS control of a second inverter charger connected to a GX device via an MK3 to USB adapter. This can really expand your system. When enabled, the secondary device will be subject to the ATC and the ATD of the VE bus connected directly to the BMS. And then the Victron EV charging station can now be controlled from the control pane of the new UI using the new control card. Quick access to toggle charge current and mode, same place where we typically control the inverter charger. No diving into the device list to get to this function anymore.
So real quick, I'd like to touch on a couple things in here. The Orion XS being able to configure that as a standard DC to DC converter. Specifically, what they said was that if you're using this in a system, if you're using the Orion XS, let's say you've got a system that has a 24-volt lithium battery bank, and you're keeping a 12-volt battery in place in the system for starting a generator, for acting as a backup if something with the 24-volt system goes down, and you've still got your 12-volt battery here, so you can start a generator or you can activate slides so you can close them if you're out in the boonies and you need to get home. If the 24-volt system goes down, you've still got this 12-volt battery in place to bring the jacks up or close the slides. With this update for the Orion XS, now you can specify that it's not an alternator charger. It's being used to charge another battery in the system. And so now on the display, because the Orion XS has the ability to connect with the GX device, instead of it just saying alternator, it'll say load, right? It'll show up as a load, and so you'll have better visibility on what the Orion XS is actually doing in the system, what it's being used for in a use case like this. So I wanted to kind of highlight that. The other thing with the MK3 to USB adapter supporting a secondary inverter charger. So why would we do that? We've got, let's say we've got a 3-phase system or even a split phase system, and we've got 2 inverters connected, 3 inverters connected, daisy chained, VE bus, and it's accessible from the GX, from the touchscreen. We're getting all the data from that. We're able to control it from there. The BMS is able to dynamically control it if it's closed loop. So that's great. But let's say we've got a 3-phase system and we've also got 120-volt loads that we want to account for. Maybe we want to have a secondary inverter system in place here. And so we can do that using an MK3 to USB to bring that inverter into the GX and to access that data and to control it. And now it's also going to be controlled via the BMS. The BMS is going to be able to dynamically control it if we're using it in this way. So not super common, but that's one example of kind of why you might have a secondary inverter charger system in place in your larger system.
So has anyone here used a custom widget when they're using VRM? What data have you used it to display? Can you guys share that in the chat? See how you guys use VRM. And so now in VRM, there is.
Hold on a sec, Peter. We got TJ raised his hand.
Oh, okay, yeah. Let's take this question.
Yeah, let's get him in here. TJ.
So a little bit of a tangent, but something I thought about when I heard simplified menus, not having to like go through deep menus to get to settings.
Mm-hmm.
One other feature that I think could be probably very easy for Victron to integrate. Like right now, there's like an advanced settings feature where like you need to put in that it's like the ZZZ to access or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice to be able to customize something like the settings are visible on the user level for say an inverter, where like most of my customers just turn their inverter on and off, but there's a lot of other settings in there, say like input amperage, that they could accidentally increase and cause a problem. They're connected to like say a 15 amp shore power supply and they increase to 30, So I think it could be nice to see Victron allow just simply something like a visibility eye that you could like customize and say, hide this, hide this, hide this, show this, so that customers are only seeing relevant information and not getting overwhelmed with a lot of other settings that they could accidentally trigger that could cause issues with their system.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really interesting. Just simplify it. It's kind of like taking installer permissions to the next level and reducing complexity even more, because like that's something that we've heard, folks have kind of requested, or they've had the idea that like, well, yeah, Victron, it's awesome, but you've got so many options that sometimes it's not as user friendly, or in terms of, a customer who just wants to forget about it and not worry about any of this advanced stuff. And we always kind of come back with, well, yeah, you've got these options from the touchscreen, but realistically, once the system's been installed, set up, programmed, tested, all of these things, it should be pretty simple in terms of just like set it, forget it. You don't really have to do much. You might turn the inverter on off. You might adjust the input current limit. There is, with this new interface, instead of having to go into the device list and select the inverter and then turn it on or off or adjust the input current from there, you can toggle a button in like the top left area of the screen, and that'll create kind of a drop, that'll show a drop down that then gives you basically quick access to do those things. But yeah, to your point, it would be nice to further simplify it for those who don't want to see all of these options and all of this data that isn't, super relevant for what they're doing.
That's
Right.
great
I
to
think
know
on
about the quick access menu, because I think that actually does solve some of this like friction.
Yep, for sure. Peter?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about that, with because there are options to continue to run the classic UI, and this new UI has, I think it's way more user friendly and understandable. And so, are people who are here, is everyone here using the new UI, or are people still using the classic UI, or do you have clients who maybe prefer the classic UI because it's familiar? But a lot of these new updates are coming out, like this 3.6, a lot of these features aren't even available in the classic UI. And like we're seeing with the breadcrumbs and things, we're seeing some more explanation of the menus are getting into. So kind of on that note is providing a little more context to where you're going within the menu to get to these settings. So I definitely though think that is kind of something that we're all working on to make that user experience a little more smooth for a lot of clients.
Yeah, and it's with updates, it should prompt you to, if you want to switch to the new UI, but in any case, it's something that you got to kind of go and do, and we've seen a number of folks that whether it's just enthusiasts who have kind of systems of their own, or even professionals who aren't taking this kind of extra step to update the UI. And so I would be curious. I think in a lot of cases, it's just not knowing, like, we need to take this extra step after we update to like go and select, we want to have the new UI. But is there anybody or does anyone have any reasons why you don't want to switch to the new UI, why you'd prefer to stay with the classic? Would definitely be interested to hear from you if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some VRM. So the new AI assistant in VRM can generate custom widgets for you in the advanced tab. You'll enter your prompt and then it's going to generate a chart for you. And some of examples of like using this are collecting all of your temperature sensor data onto a single chart. There's an example of that on this slide where I think we have about 7 Ruby temperature sensors on there, all displaying on one chart. Or how about collecting the MPPT solar yield for all of your different MPPTs onto one single chart, comparing solar yields for multiple arrays facing different directions. And this kind of centralizes a lot of this information into one area for you so you can analyze it properly. And to get access to the AI assistant, you have to have the updated Venus OS on the GX device. And When you open the advanced page in VRM, in the bottom right corner, you'll find the little AI chat icon. And if you see the bottom right corner of the slide window, that's what it looks like. And yeah, and that can be very helpful for helping you analyze data in VRM. And Android as a GX Wi-Fi display is now officially out of beta. It was previously called the Android Takeover, and there is now an official manual released from Victron for this. And this allows you to repurpose an old Android phone or a tablet to use as a screen for a GX device. This allows you to carry this around. It's doesn't have to be tethered to the GX device. And for those of you who want a larger display, this can be a very helpful option for a lot of people. And we'll drop the link to the Android GX Wi-Fi display manual in the chat. Is there anyone here who has been using this Android display, and what has your experience been like? We'd really like to know. So if you want to raise your hand or drop it in the chat. And if you do need any assistance setting up the Android as a GX Wi-Fi display, please reach out to us. We can help you get going with that. It looks like Chad set it up for a few customers. That's great to see that it's out there in the wild being used.
Nice. DM, how we doing?
Hello. Yes. I've been using an iPad for a year, and it works great. I can travel around with it. I could use an Android tablet. I have one laying around. Just about everybody has old tablets laying around. So it works quite well. But I noticed one little problem. Earlier this year, we happened to be in a campground with a large number of Victron users. Friends, mostly. And I noticed that I could see everyone's SSID. And they likewise could see mine. While most people are not skilled enough to know what that means, or what the GX device doesn't allow to change the SSID. So you're broadcasting your serial number. And as a retired IT person, I don't like that. I just don't like it.
And it's being broadcast via the
Wi-Fi.
But where do you see it? Is it like in the device list on Victron Connect, or where is it broadcast?
When you go to attach a device, a wireless device. So theoretically, any bad actor walking around a campground could see everyone's serial numbers. You can change the serial. I can change the display name of my MPPTs and stuff, but I can't change my SSID.
Now the serial number that's not used to connect to VRM, right? That's your VRM portal ID.
Portal ID connects to VRM.
In order to actually access a VRM account or set up a VRM account. In terms of the serial number of the device, DM, do you have a specific idea of what a bad actor might do with the?
Well, if they're smart enough to know that that's a serial number, okay, and know how to try to theoretically could hack into our systems and change our settings, theoretically. Whether there's someone wandering around in a campground that really could do that, well, you just never know who's hanging around and is bored. It's a campground.
Yeah, I can't say for certain in terms of with a serial number what is or isn't possible in terms of system access, but that's a really good question, and we'll look into that, and we'll touch on it in the blog and try to shed a little light in terms of what's going on here and whether or not it is something that should be addressed.
With encouraging Android use via Wi-Fi, this is going to become more prevalent. Okay. I found I could use it on an iPad. I have my iPad right in front of me. My rig happens to be sitting outside the window here at my house, 5 feet away. But you know, but I can see that ID, and so can everybody else. And
Yeah,
it's everybody else that I don't like. You know,
sure.
so
Yeah,
it just seems a security loophole. You don't have your router at home. At least I don't. Anybody shouldn't have their, you know, their home router saying this is DM's place, or this is my address. You know, lots of internet providers will set your router up, if you don't know how to set one up, with your address on there. It's like, that is just really dumb. It's the same idea.
Yeah, I appreciate you raising that. We're going to look into it and try to identify specifically what is there a security risk here, and
There could be. I think there could be.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's definitely worth talking about. So I appreciate you raising it. It looks like TJ might have, you know, maybe some thoughts on this, or let's see what he's got.
Kind of
TJ.
a separate question here, but I'm not familiar with this like iPad and Android integration. And maybe I missed it, but the tablet connects to the Wi-Fi network broadcasted by a servo.
Yes.
Okay, and then
sorry, go ahead.
And then you would just it would be like you like put that IP address, whatever it is, in the like in a browser, and just like you would on your phone or something that's connected to it.
So that's how it would work I think we're talking about different things here. So anyone connecting with an iPad, they're probably connecting using the servo's built-in Wi-Fi access point, which, to DM's point, when you look at that default setting, it does have the serial number in the actual SSID. But with this Android Wi-Fi display, it can work either with the built-in Wi-Fi access point, or if it's just on the same Wi-Fi as your servo is connected to, like if you got a Starlink or something like that you're connected to, you can connect to it that way. And there's an actual app that installs that takes over the whole Android tablet or phone, and now it can only be used as a display for that. So it's not compatible with iOS. It's a different thing. So when we're talking about using an iPad, we're most likely using that built-in Wi-Fi access point, which is a way to access the remote console of a servo.
Yeah.
But this Android takeover is like a fully integrated app that takes over, like it puts the tablet in kiosk mode. So it can only be used as the display, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's really neat, because I like that it kind of walks you into it just showing, like, acting as a display where you can't accidentally like tap the search bar or something and get booted out. It's much more like reliable. You pick it up and it's ready to go type of system.
Exactly.
And I can see this being very helpful, especially like, is the I forget the exact name, like IO Extender 150, is that out right now, or is that coming soon?
Yeah, that's also out. We have those now as well.
Oh, awesome.
And
So I think
those are Go ahead.
this could really enhance like the experience, say at like a RV show or Adventure Van Expo, being able to have a big screen and control things like lighting and awnings, and really, like, I think a lot of people would be surprised to see that level of control and portability, with also like a great updated user interface, like the new GUI that the updated software has. So yeah, I think this will be definitely a big step up for Victron as far as impressing people with control and connectivity that you can actually hold in your hand and have reliable connection to.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is kind of just the first step, and we'll see kind of where it goes from here. But this is something a lot of people have been asking for, so it's exciting that they've responded in a big way here. So,
Peter, I think you got a little bit left here with the firmware update.
Yeah, we're just gonna, how do you go about updating the firmware? And just so you know, there are two ways to do that. If you have an internet connection, you can connect your GX to a Wi-Fi or hardwired Ethernet connection. On the touch screen, navigate to Settings, Firmware, online updates, and then select check for updates. And then if you're connected to the internet, it'll say update, or I think it says press to update to v3.60. Alternatively, the firmware can also be loaded onto a USB thumb drive and then uploaded to the GX device. Step-by-step for this can be found in the GX manual. And then before we kind of move on to a Q&A session, let's quickly touch on when and why we would upgrade firmware. And just a few points here is when we're installing a new system, we're going through all the components, making sure all the firmware is up to date across the board. If we're adding new equipment to an existing system, like let's say an additional MPPT, we're updating the firmware on that once it gets installed. And then when we're adding third-party integrations, like an alternator regulator or something like that, that we want the most current firmware on our devices so that communication is going to work as expected. And then, in the case that we need or want to add newly released features, and then when we are troubleshooting, things aren't operating as expected, up-to-date firmware is typically the first step that we'll kind of begin with. And that's kind of the times we would expect to update firmware. And with that, we'll pass it back to you, Kaza.
Yeah, and on this firmware thing, it seems kind of like, well, duh, right? Like a simple sort of thing, but we can't tell you. I mean, we're working with these systems all day, every day, and the amount of times, we get tech support calls and firmware update, fixed it. The inverter, the control's not working exactly how it should. It's acting a little buggy. Update the firmware, fixed. We've got an Arco Zeus in the system and we're not seeing the data that we expect to see. Firmware update on everything, fixed. And maybe not every single time that might not be the answer, but if you call us, for example, and we're trying to troubleshoot something with you, probably the first thing we're going to ask is the firmware up to date? So that's, yeah, just to kind of drive that home a little. The updating firmware, it's a simple thing. It's easy to forget sometimes, but definitely worthwhile if you're troubleshooting anything.
And I would just add on that, I would just say that it's a nice baseline to begin with. We can make sure that everything's kind of starting at the same level.
Mm-hmm. So look, we really appreciate y'all joining us. Stick around through the Q&A. We've got something to share. But for now, we're going to open it up for questions. We've got a few in the chat that we'll get to, but if you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll have a discussion. So yeah, what do you guys got?
See, Mike is asking, where can I rewatch this? This is going to be posted on YouTube fairly soon.
Next week.
Next week.
Yeah, and then in the next week it'll be on YouTube, and we'll send out a link in our newsletter, and if you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, you'll find it. Trek Systems is the YouTube channel.
It's like Kenny's got a question.
Okay.
On the extender and the SmartSwitch, do you got to do fuse protection from the device to the appliance or whatever you're controlling?
Good question. Dan?
Yes, yeah. So with the SmartSwitch specifically, it has built-in digital switching that's adjustable from 2 to 5 amps at most for each channel. With the GXIO extender, that's what makes it a little different. It doesn't have that built-in digital fusing that the SmartSwitch has. So while you can control loads with it, you would still need some external circuit protection for anything that you're connecting to it. But the SmartSwitch, by comparison, has that built-in digital switching, which is a nice feature.
I guess, can you set that amperage on that digital side?
Like on the GX UI?
No, the other one, the smart one. Can you set the output amperage? Does it automatically?
You mean for the fuse? I guess I'm
No,
not.
you said 2 to 5 amps output.
Yeah.
Does it need to be controlled, or does it matter?
Is that adjustable? On the SmartSwitch, it has a range of amperage, and it is adjustable in terms of what you can set it depending on what's connected, so that if you've got a smaller gauge cable set and on one of the channels, you can dial that down to 2 amps, for example.
Exactly that, yeah. And that can be done on the Servo UI once you have it connected. All that's adjustable in there.
Okay, makes sense.
Mhm. I think Mike earlier had asked about daisy chaining the GXIO. So that's powered by USB. So it's the SmartSwitch, the daisy chaining happens through VE-CAN. So that's why that's a possibility. You can add multiple GXIO extenders. It just connects with USB. And I looked on the spec sheet, it pulls like 100 millivolts, and the max for a single USB input on the Servo is like 500 millivolts. So you could use hypothetically like a USB hub to power multiple of those together. And I think Evan had asked the GXIO about if it works for 48 volt systems. It does. It just connects via USB, and the Servo works with 12 through 48 volt systems. So plug and play there.
Christian asked about updating firmware to all your devices. Yes, anything that can. So you do that whenever you've got a initial install. You go through and you update firmware everywhere. If you're installing a new MPPT, for example, you don't necessarily need to go through and update the firmware on your inverter charger. That's something that, unless you're having, an issue or something, troubleshooting something specific to the inverter charger, that's a little more involved in terms of updating the firmware. So it's not always, absolutely necessary to update that. You do want to update it on the initial install for an inverter charger, but afterwards, if you add another piece into the system and it hasn't affected the inverter charger's function in any way, and you've still got full control and visibility of that on the touchscreen and everything like that, it's operating like you expect, then you don't necessarily need to go in there and update the firmware on the inverter charger at that time. Any other questions? Evan?
So yeah, I was just wondering if you can use the I/O extender to control, say, a series of relays in a distribution board that would then, because obviously you need a relay to operate a circuit breaker. So if you could use, say, multiple relays connected to the GX extender to then, say, for example, like real world scenario, if you had a split air conditioning system behind a 16 amp circuit breaker and you wanted to be able to turn it off using scheduling from the servo through the relay, you could then send a signal to the relay to turn off like an actual higher amperage device. So you're not limited by the 5 amp on the extender.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could 100% use it in that way.
Yeah, because that's been something we've been trying to do for a while, and we've had to do some sort of workarounds. So yeah, that's exciting for us. We'll play around with that.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, you could absolutely use, whether it's the relay native to the GX device or one of these additional relays on the IO extender. You can use, because it's limited in terms of ampacity, you can use that to then control another relay that has a higher ampacity rating to control any loads, any larger loads like that.
No, that was it. I love my hand.
Awesome. It looks like we got something from TJ too. TJ?
Yeah, so this is actually something I was wondering about, because generally our main overhead lights in the van are consuming about 5 to 8 amps depending on the length of the strips, and we need to use some sort of relay to trigger. My first thought was, okay, to power these lights, I'll just have each light strip individually go to an input on the extender 150. but that's kind of inefficient wiring wise because I got to run 2 wires, right? So it sounds like I could use a relay that has a higher amperage rating to power, say, lighting up to 10 amps. And then the relay switched by a single input on the extender 150. It sounds like I could actually have that relay be the relay that is on the extender 150.
I think the tricky part with that is that if you've got the IO extender, you've got a relay from there that is controlling lights, and you're not using the native PWM function within the IO extender, one of the PWM outputs for lighting in particular, then without having exactly, yeah, wouldn't it be
Yeah.
dimmable?
Okay, so are there high amperage PWM relays? But because a relay can only be open or closed, correct?
Yeah, well, I think what would be used and we were talking about this as well, and we know there's different lighting kind of control modules and other things out there that they're not Victron specific, but I think could be used in this way. And so really ultimately what you would need is the PWM output of the IO extender to control another kind of lighting lighting module, lighting control board that also has this PWM capability, and basically have those synchronized in some way. And I'm not exactly sure what that would look like or what you would use for that. It's something we've talked about and we're going to explore further, but that's in theory kind of what you'd be what you'd be going for in terms of being able to still control it from the GX device, but allow a higher ampacity kind of lighting control.
Yeah, so basically you're saying some device that has a PWM in and a PWM out, and there'd have to be some sort of larger amount of copper to allow the higher amperage to be controlled by the lower amperage input.
Right.
I mean, that's a very oversimplified.
Right, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's the idea, and I don't know if potentially the SmartSwitch would be kind of the answer here in terms of
Yeah.
I know those channels are fairly limited as well in terms of total amperage output, so we might be in a similar situation there, but yeah, that's our understanding of it.
I'll just add on
Cool.
that. Essentially, if you could get an LED driver that would accept a PWM input, an LED driver that's going to control your lighting that can accept a PWM input, then you
So
would
the
have.
driver has a separate power, correct?
Yes. It's not
Yeah.
powered from the GX at all,
Yeah.
but that's where the switching is done and the control that tells that driver what to output.
Yeah, no, I like that solution. That sounds like something I could do tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are pretty readily available. You can find them fairly commonly.
Yeah, and one thing that you reminded me of, TJ, that I'd like to bring up before we close here is with Node-RED, we were brainstorming earlier about some other kind of possibilities here, and with the PWM function being controllable through Node-RED, now you could set up an automation that, for example, when you hit a certain time, it's evening, you could have your lights start to come on. You could have them ramp up in terms of dimness. So, as it gets later, maybe you could automate kind of dimming as well. So, 8, 9 o'clock rolls around, you've got an automation in place where your lights will boom automatically dim to 20, 30%, whatever. So that kind of ties back into what's possible using this Node-RED capability alongside the IO extender.
Does Node-RED have the ability to control addressable LEDs?
good question. And I'm a little bit out of my area of expertise.
Add it to the blog.
We can add it in there. I think anything, Node-RED can communicate with anything that utilizes MQTT or Modbus. So if it has that capability to relay information to the servo, then hypothetically, yes. But yeah, we could look into that for some more concrete examples.
Yeah, I think that would, I mean, definitely not necessary, but
Right.
certainly add a higher level of controlled LED strips.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And a lot of times those addressable LEDs are controlled through the driver. So you can kind of, with a lot of this equipment we're talking about today, there's a lot of it's opening up a lot of possibilities, and we'll see more and more integrations come up in the near future. I think, to answer a lot of these questions that people are specifically trying to implement.
Yeah, thanks for all that input. It's great information.
Cool. Thanks, TJ. So we appreciate you guys sticking around. We're going to drop something in the chat here, a code that you guys can use. Also want to highlight next month, about a month from now, we'll do our next webinar. This is going to be a VRM deep dive. And we'll start from the foundations, kind of understanding what VRM at a more basic level, and what is VRM at a more basic level, and how do we utilize this. But then we'll get into some of the more advanced kind of troubleshooting strategies in ways that we can use some of the stuff we learned today, maybe the AI chat capability of creating some custom graphs, or even just more simply, what graphs, what widgets should we enable to or disable to make sure our view is simplified in a way that's useful for us to kind of visualize the data that's available, whether it's real time or historical, and take that data and troubleshoot, solve problems, reduce time spent on the phone trying to relay back and forth what might be happening. We use VRM probably every single day to look at various things and troubleshoot or do remote programming, system configuration, stuff of that nature. So we will drop a link in the chat now for VRM. I'll drop that, guys. And for the VRM webinar registration, we've also got a QR code here. If you don't have an account with us, that'll take you to our application there to join. But yeah, for today, I think that's all we got. Thanks for joining us, everybody.